Good evening. It's with great pleasure that I welcome all of you to the sixth virtual gathering of the Surrey Muse. The Surrey Muse Art Showcase brings together the greatest and coolest and hippest and least well-known voices of the Vancouver metro area in an extravaganza of arts, community, and love once a month. And this month, we're going to be featuring the author Alix, Ohlun, the poet Sophia Naz, the performer Sherry Duggal, and our open mic opener will be Martha Warren. I'm your host, Jovian Radheshwar, and I have performed at Surrey Muse in the past under the name MC Bitter Buffalo and under the name of my group Endangered Species, which is a hip-hop group based out of Vancouver, Portland, and Los Angeles, California. One love to the United States of America. To America, fuck the United States. One love to the people of America, fuck the United States. The government, the states, the president, fuck them all. They should all go, burn somewhere where it ain't pleasant. We are suffering through tremendous difficulty, all of us right now, and we have such tremendous fortune here in British Columbia. One love to our brothers and sisters down south who are doing their very best to survive every day. Hi, Mom. Do okay. I hope you're doing okay out there in Long Island in New York City. All right. Today's theme is also, very importantly, equality. Equality is central to modern society. Without equality, you have something like feudalism. And of course, there are many moves to undo equality or entrench forms of inequality in the world today. And so it's very important that we hear from our artist community and from our activism community speaking up for equality. And finally, last but not least, I want to just quickly mention that the artwork for today's meeting of the Surrey Muse on our poster features Aaron Paquette, and his work here, The Owl, is a wonderful picture that symbolizes both the human and the animal, and also, in addition to that, the transcendental knowledge that can be found in the realm between both. Indeed, the animal is also equal to the human being. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest, and they will take over from here. Thank you. Alix Olean is a novelist, a short story writer, an educator, and a mentor who has published 5 books, including 2 novels, The Dual Citizens in 2019 and Inside in 2012, that were shortlisted for both the Giller Prize and the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize. Her work has appeared in various publications, such as The Best American Short Stories, Best New American Voices, and The New Yorker. Alix has taught creative writing and literature at McGill University, Lafayette College, Warren Wilson College, and at the New York State Summer Writers Institute. She graduated from Harvard University with an English and American Literature and Language degree in 1992, and then earned a master's in writing from the Michener Center for Writers in Texas in 2001. Alix now lives in Vancouver, where she is the chair of UBC's creative writing program since 2018.
Hi everyone, I'm Alix Olean, and I'm speaking to you from my home near the UBC campus, where I'm privileged to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I'm delighted to be a part of this Surrey Muse event. Thank you so much for listening and having me be a part of it. I'm going to read to you from the opening pages of my most recent novel. It's called Dual Citizens, and because it's the beginning, there's nothing that you need to know to follow the action. The story of Scotty's life, which is, of course, the story of my life too, begins with my sister, Robin. It's strange how little we talk about it now. Of the three of us, I'm the only one who dwells on our history, probably because I'm the one who chose and formed it. If I bring up that day in the Laurentians, Robin says she doesn't remember much about it. I find this impossible to imagine. For me, the opposite is true, with every detail lodged unwaveringly in my memory, recorded in detail, like a film I can replay at any time. It goes like this. A sunny day in June, the leafy heat of summer at odds with my frozen terror as I stood fixed to the ground. The air thick and still as a wall against Robin's ragged breath. And the wolf my sister had named Catherine, inspecting us both with her yellow eyes. Robin was 38 weeks pregnant at the time, and she just irritably informed me that pregnancy lasted 10 months, not 9. She was angry about this, as if there had been a conspiracy to keep her misinformed. She was angry in general because she was hot and uncomfortable and couldn't sleep. We were walking down a trail behind her house that led to a canopy of pine trees, hoping the air would be cooler there. Walking was all Robin wanted to do, although she complained about this too. Her hips hurt, her knees hurt, her ribs hurt. Complaining wasn't typical of my sister, who was stoically, even savagely independent, and it worried me. We stopped every few steps so she could catch her breath, and when we did, I watched her stroke her belly. She wasn't in other ways tender toward the baby inside her or herself. She frowned. What are you doing? Nothing. You're touching yourself, she said. I hadn't realized until then that I was imitating her, making myself a mirror. My palm was flat against my own stomach, though there was nothing to stroke. I flushed with embarrassment, and my sister gave her harsh bark of a laugh. That's okay, she said. I get it. But how could she get it? She didn't live in my body any more than I could live in hers. We stood body to body, sister to sister, across an impossible divide. To change the subject, I began telling her about a cache of old films that had been discovered in a permafrost landfill beneath an ice rink in Dawson City, Yukon. Dating from the early 20th century, the films had belonged to a movie house. Back in those days, I said, movies traveled from California to cities like Calgary and Vancouver before heading to Whitehorse and eventually reaching the mining community in Dawson City, at which point it made no sense to ship them back to their point of origin. So they accumulated there, an accidental archive. The films were made of cellulose nitrate, a material known to disintegrate, melt, even spontaneously combust. If they hadn't been buried below the rink, nestled alongside chicken wire and dirt and bits of wooden debris, they might have burned the whole town down. Movies used to explode? Robin said. I nodded. I told her how the movie house went out of business and dumped the films, which were found decades later by a backhoe operator clearing the land for a new recreation center. The story fascinated me with its unlikely combination of flammable film and icy bedrock, of preservation by neglect, how a town had maintained its history by forgetting it. Most silent films of that era have been lost to fire or decay, but abandonment saved these ones. As for my sister, she'd heard me go on about this kind of trivia for years. I was a collector of arcane information, especially anything related to film, and I suppose she must have been used to it. She was listening now, so quietly that it took me longer than it should have to notice something was wrong. Her eyes were trained on a point behind my head. Look, she said. We saw the wolf trot out of the forest like a lost dog looking for its home. From her strange gait, one leg hobbled, we knew it was Catherine. Her gray-brown fur looked knotted and flat, her body narrow-hipped and sinewy. It was possible, we thought later, that she was looking for her pack. To me, it hardly matters. Her motives aren't my concern. What I remember is her graceless stagger and how quickly she moved despite it. How when she bore down on us, so close that I could see her eyes, I couldn't tell whether she recognized us, whether the bond Robin had nurtured with her was sturdy or significant or the slightest bit present in her mind. What happened next was my fault. The wolf ran toward Robin as if to jump on her, and I pulled my sister sharply to the side, scared for both her and the baby. Robin wrestled against me, wanting to greet Catherine, I guess, or at least to see her close up. A fit of vertigo washed over me then, the sky and earth changing places, everything solid, jellied, and spun. I clung to whatever I could grasp as my vision hazed, and inside my ears was the crash and roll of some invisible ocean. I think I grabbed Robin's shoulder, but it might have been her leg. That's how disoriented I was. In the push and pull between us, Robin lost her balance, stumbled, and fell. The wolf kept going, running past us as if we didn't even exist. Slowly my eyes cleared and the ground assembled itself beneath me. Vertigo passing is like an earthquake in reverse. Pieces knit themselves back together, the world unshutters and comes to rest. Next to me, Robin moaned, a terrible, keening sound. "Are you all right?" I said. She didn't answer. Her face was an ashy color I'd never seen before, and she pressed a hand to her belly again, the gesture not gentle this time. I cradled my sister's head in my lap, but she seemed hardly to notice my presence, much less be eased by it. Her body was hot to my touch, her hair sticking wetly to my hand. Then we heard the rest of the pack begin to vocalize in rolling harmonics, whether in greeting to Catherine or for some other reason. Their silvery howls rose and fell, rose and fell. I thought it was spooky, but Robin's face relaxed and she opened her eyes. What I found wild, she found a comfort, and that had always been a difference between us. "Where's Catherine?" she said. I told her I didn't know. The wolf had gone. My sister struggled to sit up, and I could see she was hurting, but there was no stopping her from standing. There had never been any stopping Robin from whatever she wanted to do. She got to her feet, though her knees buckled once, and she had to brace herself against me as I tried and failed to coax her back into the house. Only my sister would have ignored going into labor in order to look for a wolf. Only my sister would have asked, through the pain, where did she go? The next part I'm going to read is called Childhood. And it goes back in time to when these two sisters are younger. It seems to me now, as I look back, that my sister was never entirely tame. When we were children, Robin often disappeared for an hour, an afternoon, a day. Our mother, who was rarely home, didn't notice, but I was bothered by these absences. I nursed a passion for regularity. I craved fixed meal times and weekday routines. Every Wednesday, I went to the pizza parlor down the block from our apartment and, using the crinkled bills our mother left scattered on the counter, bought a pizza, carried it home in a white box loose-bottomed with grease, and waited. I only did this on Wednesdays. On Tuesdays, my class had library time, and on Thursdays, we had art. I liked the library and art, but I loved knowing what was coming next. In my mind, each day wore a color: purple for library, orange for pizza, a splatter of yellow for art, that stitched the week into a rainbow, into structure and sense. Even at that age, I was a collector of patterns, a magpie in search of scraps. Our mother, Marianne, was vexed by my expectations. If I asked her when she'd be home, she wouldn't answer, finding the question unreasonable. She considered it a form of imprisonment to say where she was going or why, and as the young mother of 2 young children, she'd already been imprisoned enough. At least that's what I think now. At the time, I thought she resented us and contrived one reason or another to be away from us as much as she could, which may also have been true. Marianne was beautiful. She had long, shiny black hair that she wore loose or in a flat ponytail tied at the base of her neck, and either way you could see her high, pale forehead and dark brown eyes. Years later, at a museum in New York, I came across Giacometti's tall, spindly bronze sculptures of women and burst into tears because they reminded me so much of her, thin but not fragile, flesh hard as metal, unembraceable. She didn't enjoy being touched, at least not by me. She came from a rigid Catholic family, the dual strands of Irish and French-Canadian tradition forcefully interwoven, and I suspect her father had laid a hand on her more than once when she was growing up. Her mother was equally severe. When Marianne was 15, she began fighting with them, protesting that her older brothers were given freedoms and futures denied to her. Her parents wanted her to get married as soon as possible. That was the extent of their hopes. Enraged, she left their cramped apartment near the Farin Five Roses flower sign and moved in with a friend whose parents were more permissive. She dropped out of school and got a job at a record store where she charmed anyone who came in for a listen. She knew every band and every album. I'll say this for Marianne, whatever her faults, she filled our home with music. She had a Magnavox turntable and a collection of albums she borrowed from the store, rotating the stock in her personal library, so we grew up listening to everything from Félix Leclerc to Mahler to the Rolling Stones. It was at the record store that she met my father, who'd come to Montreal from Vermont. Although the draft for the Vietnam War had ended 2 years earlier, he maintained conscientious objections to American warmongering. He was, according to Marianne, very handsome and not very smart. She had no pictures to show me, so I was left to conjure him based on her description. A curly-haired puppy of a boy, 19 years old, who wore plaid shirts and a sheepskin jacket unbuttoned despite the cold. They spent most of their time together with his friends. She enjoyed this, the feeling of being apart from her own background, of breaking ties to the past without even having to leave town. When they discovered she was pregnant, Todd whooped with happiness, she told me, and I have no reason to doubt her. She never once lied to protect my feelings. They didn't marry because marriage was a corrupt institution of the bourgeoisie, a fading remnant of the old order, and they put my mother's last name, Brossard, on my birth certificate. Todd stayed in Montreal long enough to bestow upon me his American citizenship and a collection of rare coins he'd brought along from Vermont, thinking he could sell them to support us. They were worth less than he'd imagined, and so, I gather, were we. One morning, Marianne woke up to find him gone, leaving a garbled and poorly written note that she tore up in irritation and whose contents she could not, years later, remember. I've never looked for my father. I like to think he has regrets, that sometimes he wakes at night believing someone has spoken to him, a voice he doesn't know but nonetheless recognizes, that sometimes, when he sees a woman my age, he wonders if that's what his daughter looks like, walks like. This is my right to think about him as I please, since he's never been around to contradict me. After he left, we were alone together. Another girl of that era, adolescent and abandoned, might have turned to her family for help, but not Marianne. Finding herself a single mother only reaffirmed her break from her background, her stalwart refusal of their judgment and values. Her parents, Kathleen and Jean-Louis, didn't even know she'd had a baby until they encountered her on Sherbrooke Street, pushing me in a pram one Saturday afternoon. Marianne was wearing what she called, with the fond nostalgia she reserved for herself, an outrageous costume. Something like a flapper dress, hung with beads that shook when she moved, and platform sandals, and a feather in her hair. She'd come to think of life as performance. Calmly, she kissed them each on both cheeks. Jean-Louis sputtered wordlessly. Kathleen burst into tears. Their reaction seemed to have as much to do with her appearance as with the baby. Marianne lifted a corner of the blanket one of her friends had crocheted for me and explained that the father was an American, that they had named me in memory of the summer days they'd spent in LaFontaine Park while she was pregnant, listening to the sounds of birds. So it could have been worse. I might have been a cardinal or a dove, but my name infuriated Marianne's parents, as she must have known it would. The fact that in French it was the name of the Montreal football team only added to the offense. Marianne didn't care. "That's her name," she announced on the street, "whether you like it or not." This story was one of her favorites, and I used to beg her to tell it when she was putting me to sleep, knowing it made her tender that she'd caress my cheek with a finger. "Mais qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, Alouette?" cried her perplexed, angry father. "What kind of a name is Lark?" I'll stop there.
Next up, we have Sophia Naz, who is a poet, author, editor, and translator who has published 3 collections of her poems titled Peripheries in 2015, Pointillism in 2017, that's a cool name, and Date Palms also in 2017. She also wrote a biography for her mother, Shahnaz, that was published by Penguin Random House in 2019. Sophia has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize twice, for creative nonfiction in 2016 and poetry in 2018. Her work features in various literary journals and anthologies in the United States, Europe, and South Asia. The list includes Poetry International Rotterdam, the Adirondack Review, The Wire, Chicago Quarterly Review, Blaze Vox, Scroll, The Daily O, Cafe Dissensus, Guftugu, Pratik, Gallery International, Cold Noon, Vayava, The Bangalore Review, and Madras Courier. Sophia is a United States-based bilingual writer. Sophia Nas, everybody. Sophia Nas.
Hello everyone, I'm Sophia Naz and I'm delighted to be sharing my poetry with you today on Surrey Muse. I'd like to thank Fawzia Rafiq for extending this generous invitation to me during what is a momentous time in all of our lives. I'd like to begin with a poem that I wrote after I lost my home to wildfires 3 years ago. It's called Aftermath. The calculus that what's beyond the hill must be left at memory's table. A feast not meant to be eaten, but pierced at the precise point which leads smoothly into the needle's nose, hugs the thread snug so thought fleshed out, desiccates but doesn't fall like meat tendering a resignation. The trees are bereft of berries now. You would have paused to pick them, grasping at branches just beyond your reach, and knees would bruise, ripe as a summer's peach disappears, leaving only a sunset stain in the corner of sky's wordless mouth. Fall's moist mist almost dissipated. Only wisps of stubborn weed cling to the hill, sides feathers ostrich brown, akin to you, whose head swims in the sand, The drought has dealt you well. You dwell in doubts. The hill still beckons. Almost against your will, you are walking. Woodpeckers on tap to open up the trapdoors. Char as far as the eye can roam. Sinew of auburn manzanitas, burned and hacked to pieces. Reel after reel, you can't unsee the forest's depth. A silent movie plays on. The orchestra a hollow pump, fist of an organ, thumping on and on you walk to the top, the slope abruptly condescending. The price extracted in perspiration's penance paid you richly in coin. In kind, you preened the plumes as a peacock dancing in the rain would scatter a myriad eyes. Their blue made not of borrowed pigment, but out of bent light, reflecting ways of seeing nothing, multiplying a hall of mirrors and a single flame. The last house on a dead-end road would rise up and fill your eyes. First, the roundabout, full with aloe and well-fed quills of succulents. Then the porch, overhung with ivy, so thick even envy would pale away like winter sun. Shining where it once stood, where you stand, on scarred earth, scabbed into scrub, as if, after many blows, a giant had fallen, and through his maws you saw the valley yawn wide, felt something give as the waters rushed in. This next poem is one that I just wrote a few days ago, and it marks the bleak anniversary of 1 year of the abrogation of Article 370 in Kashmir. It's a ghazal called Darkness and Darkness. Earth's been around the sun, Kashmir, where it was in darkness. While tyrants spin untruths, enact laws in darkness. Twin apples, her eyes, blinded in paradise. Whose bite marks are these? Flesh knows their jaws in darkness. O cowardly assassins, snuffing out the light, even Jesus did not bear his cross in darkness. You may ambush and kill me, bury all evidence, but a rebel seed plies its cause in darkness. Mothers of the disappeared have cursed your sleep. The last of your conscience gnaws in darkness. You are welcome to your skyscrapers, their glitter. Nas is anomalous fire. She thaws in darkness. And this next poem is about disappearances of activists, of bloggers, of all kinds of people, of journalists, anybody, free thinkers that are a staple of life in Pakistan today. This is called In the City of Proper Nouns. In the city of proper nouns, those who spoke of desires other than objects lived perilously, as if speaking was leaping from building to building. Their words, tiny fireflies dancing in the gathering darkness, slipped through the keyholes, trying to shine a light in the caves of closed minds. Those who knew nothing but names in the city of proper nouns identified them easily, disappeared them like an eraser does, the faulty but true mathematics of 1 + 1 is 1. Erased them wherever they stood, or spoke, or marched, or loved, or raised a glass of laughter to their lips. The rulers of the city of proper nouns hated and feared the lovers who spoke only of you and me, because desire cannot be given an ID card, nor the wind a plot of land. The masters of the city of proper nouns, who like to remain nameless themselves, rule with an iron hand, an invisible line you cannot cross, or else you are crossed out yourself. As if your life was a wrong answer to the test that asks you only to seal your lips, maintain a chain link of silence. Back to America, and this is a poem I wrote after the killing of George Floyd. And it's called Take a Breath. Take a breath. Because you are more than this color that folds all others in its rainbow, more than bruised flesh oppressed and pushed until all words have left. Take a breath, dear brother, because you are more than 400 years of hate and hurt, more than the surround sound of silence complicit in daily hum. Take a breath, dear brother, because you are an arc of history that is long and long overdue, but bending under the weight of strangled fruit. At last, to a slight semblance of justice. Take a breath, dear brother, because we gather our strength. Open our lungs, unbind our tongues, in your name and in the name of all the others, brothers and sisters and mothers, killed in these fields we call our home, our hearth. Take a breath, dear brother, because you said you wanted to touch the world, and here we are, holding you, holding on. Ode to a Scar. Lonely signpost. Most days I turn away from you, avert my gaze. Who wants to dwell on unloveliness, tether? Yet there is an undertow in the welting, the warp and weft that knits, written on the body, its poundage, betrayed calligraphy of missive, missile. Sacred scar, I wanted to interpret you like a dream, leisurely, like one would unwind a gauze-wrapped heirloom, interrupted flesh. But you became a cheeky meteor, shooting scar, firing fusillades of synapses. Now geography, history, and memory burn within your crossbones scar. On the surface, you recede to a whisper. It is only in the unseen caverns of my cheek that you howl like a wolf at the many moons of my teeth. This next poem is called Lineage. Before you were born, she skimmed your boundary. Mother of all stripes, linea negra, a lean line, simple as the clean cut that popped you, squeak and pip of two signature lines. Cradled in timber, the line grew shape. A skipping scribble floated the Malvi, twisting your naughty ear to still of bay, made slender letter boat anchored by a single nukta. Slowly you were made to form Lakir ka Fakir. The line that would fill your life like water does a glass. This much was clear. Must memorize, repeat line after line. No loving in this repeating. Which brings us to lineage. Conundrum at hand. Look under the womanhood. The line you must not cross is given, circumscribed. It hems you in from head to toe. The line, as manual, precipice, edge, abyss, endless knots become crosses. Ash Wednesdays, the forehead weathers, season after season. Red and unread lines are everywhere, demarcations of otherness. When you are swimming in the sea of another language, the line becomes a lone shark. It swallows Alif Lela and gives you Ralph Lauren. When the line falls in love, becomes a couplet, joined forever in the holy matrimony of poetry. Even as a lifeline stops galloping, on the electric page, Above the hospice bed slumps two sad elbows, becomes the four lines of the coffin, a quatrain from whose walls there is no escape, only passage. I'd like to conclude with a poem called Pause. To take a breath, pause. Lift your finger as needle off seismograph from pulse of apocalypse, charred carcass of a baby kangaroo in mid-flight. To pause, to close weary eyes against the blinding warning signs ever so briefly, because the heart can only take so much plight, and like a flower must lean sometimes to the light. Smell the fragile stargazer lilies, trembling all the while in dismal headlines that bumblebees are tumbling towards extinction, and despots stand smug among us. Smiling puppeteers pull strings, watch the fight. If we have indeed reached the end of days in the age of the Anthropocene, obscene in unrelenting greed, wrecked the Holy Grail, only planet, cup out of which all must drink or die. Pause even then. Sip. Delight in the last sunset. Feel its blush seep into your skin before the final bell of darkness sounds and fades, each and every sentient being tonight. Thank you.
Next up, we've got Sherry Dougal, who is a South Asian Canadian actor, dancer, author, and a naturopathic doctor who often combines her different skills to create art. Amazing. Sherry's play, Eve, A Balancing Act, was performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland. Her first book, Beneath the Surface, is written in poetic prose as a stream of consciousness focusing on a healing journey. Her second book, Shringar, The Different Shades of an Indian Bride, is a poetry anthology that celebrates the feminine. Sherry's scripts and plays have featured in international festivals, including Rabindranath Tagore Festival, Sufi Legacy Conference, Diwali Fest, Summer in the City, Mother Tongue Festival, Masala, Mehndi, Musti, and Pull Festival. Sherry has presented her work at World Poetry, Poetic Justice, Pandora's Collective, Holy Wow Poets, Writers International Network, and, of course, Surrey Muse. Born and raised in Vancouver, Sherry has published and performed her work in India, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada. Sherry Dougal, everybody. Sherry Dougal.
It's a Bollywood song. It's a classic Amitabh Bachchan Rekha song. And music and dance and song is an essential part of Bollywood cinema. It's all about love. It's all about romance. And in this song, she's pretty much saying, yes, it's true. Everyone's saying that I'm falling for you. Sab kehte hain maine tujhko dil de diya, that I've given my heart to you. Yes, it's true. And And that's what this song is all about. It's a fun little expression-based piece, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm just going to get the music going. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. It is a semi-classical dance piece. I've been trained in pure classical dance. It's called Bharatnatyam. There's many different pure classical dance forms in different parts of India. There's Kathak. Kathak has a lot of lines, which represents the flowing nature of the area. It's a lot of rivers and flowing waters. And the dance form that I was trained in is Bharatnatyam. A lot of crisp, sharp movements representing the rocky area and the rocky nature of the south. So believe it or not, the dance form reflected the environment itself. Now in the pure classical dance form, Bharatnatyam style, a lot of triangles. This is called the Adamandi position. A lot of triangles here, as you can see, triangle there. Triangles represent the sacrificial altar into which inspiration is poured. So this piece is a semi-classical dance piece and basically celebrating the beauty of the woman. He's dedicated this song to her. Yes, of course, it's very romantic. He's dedicating this song to her, celebrating her beauty, and he's saying, Jaga ghumya, tere jaisa na koi, which means the whole world rotates and there is no one else like you on this planet. The whole world continues to move, there's no one else like you. Yes. And that is what this song is about. And it does have expression, but it's very movement oriented. And I hope you enjoy it. Just going to get the music set up. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that. Hello everyone, I'm back. The next item on the agenda is my Solar Shingar dance. Solar Shingar are the 16 traditional ornamentations of an Indian bride. And it includes henna, which you put on the hands. It includes henna. It includes earrings, bracelets, anklets, toe rings, waistband. It includes all of those traditional elements that transform a woman into a goddess. So my book is a celebration of the feminine. And the dance was inspired by the words in my book and inspired by the whole concept of what it means to be a woman. I did a lot of research behind this. It's a lot of symbolism and meaning behind each of those elements. There's nowhere in the world where a woman dresses up like the way a woman, Indian woman, dresses up. And you can't help notice, even when you go on the metro in India, you can't help but notice. So I'm going to present my dance, explain how I choreograph my dance and what the gestures mean, and maybe also read some poetry along with that. All right, so if you give me a second again, I'm going to put the music on. And I'm going to take a second and I shall explain what those movements mean in the next segment. Thank you. So I wanted to kind of explain those movements. Of course, the movements were inspired by my book. And I wanted to start by kind of listing off the Solar Shingar. So let's start with that so that everyone knows what they are. It's in my book, in the prelude. They include the Gajra. The Gajra is the flowers in the hair. Sindoor is traditionally put on the partition of the hair. Sindoor, symbolically red. Bindi, which is the dot on the forehead. Mangtika, which is the headpiece. Kajal, which is the eyeliner. Nose ring. Earrings. Necklace. Bangles, mendi, also known as henna. Arsi, thumb ring, which is very significant. Kamarband, I'm sure you saw that element in my dance. Bajuband, you also probably saw me putting on my armlets, they're called. Ittar, perfume. Paya, which is the toe ring. And finally, the bridal dress itself. So, in India, water is considered to be very feminine. I think in many cultures, it's very flowing, very beautiful. And the sacred river in India is called the Ganga. The Ganga is very sacred to the point that people even want their ashes thrown into the Ganga after they are cremated. That's how sacred the Ganga river is. It represents the feminine, and it is a feminine principle of life. So in the beginning of my dance, I'm sure you saw this gesture, and this is the Ganga flowing on Lord. The river Ganga is indicated by this gesture. The river Ganga is flowing from Lord Shiva's head. He carries her on top of his head as she flows down to the earth. And this is what it indicates through this gesture, is the Ganga, basically any body of water representing the feminine. And then I play with the water, and then I go and pour the water onto my face. These are the movements. And I do some traditional classical, semi-classical movements. And then I also take a step forward as I'm daring to enter new territory. Or you can even think of it as being courageous enough, to be vulnerable enough to tap into your feminine. As she rolls forward onto the earth. Now I think this is the moment where I'd like to sit down and read you my poem on the Ganga. This is from my book Shringar, The Different Shades of an Indian Bride. It's called the goddess referring to the goddess Ganga. The goddess. She frees you from the cycle of life and death. She frees you from the cycle of life and death, cleansing you of your sins. And as Ganga rushes forth, she brings the heavens to earth. Too vast to be contained, the whole world trembles in her wake. Shiva catches her in the locks of his matted hair, and he too becomes her vessel, a blank slate, restless, rolling. She pours life into him as the sun, the moon, and the stars move with the waves, floating in their midst. So this is very traditional Indian mythology. So I have a little note for those who are of not South Asian background. The Ganga is the most sacred river to the Hindus and is worshipped as a goddess. Moksha or salvation can be obtained by immersing one's ashes in the Ganga, which I mentioned before. Lord Shiva has Ganga on his head, and she is considered to be his wife along with Parvati.
Next up, to open up our open mic session for today's evening performance and spectacular, is Martha Warren, who is a poet and author who has recently launched her debut title, Grill Queen, a cookbook that includes anecdotes on grilling, healing from loss, and reclaiming the joy of cooking, while her forthcoming novel, Proton, explores money laundering, murder, and particle physics. Honestly, I must say that sounds awesome. There's nothing like meditating over a rack of lamb. That is absolutely fantastic. I'm already a fan. In poetry, Martha's subjects range from mythology to single parenting to aspects of law. She was shortlisted for the Federation of BC Writers Flash Prose Contest in 2018 and awarded second place prize for poetry by the North Shore Writers Association in 2018. Martha graduated from Simon Fraser University's Writers Studio, Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the League of Canadian Poets, Poetry Pause, and Fresh Voices, Headline Press, and Red Alder Review. She is an active member of various writers' organizations and online communities. Martha lives in West Vancouver and is now compiling a collection of her poems. West Vancouver, a great place to grill and write poetry. Martha Warren, everybody. Martha Warren. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Surrey Muse for including me tonight. It's really an honor to be in such company. I'm going to start by reading from Mother Talk, a short collection of poems by emerging Vancouver poets Barbara Carter, Trish Gauntlet, Sophia Rose Musiche, Steffi Taddy, and me. It's the first in a series of e-booklets to connect people with poetry during COVID-19, each on a theme. This one, Mother Talk, explores the complexities of the mother figure. It's entitled John Locke and the Hyper-Parent. Give me a blank slate and I'll happily fill it for you, with advanced kindergarten and piano lessons, after-school robotics and soccer academy, junior coding camp, power chess, to enrich your every waking moment, you so accomplished it will be my life rewritten. And then you will turn 14, raise one eyebrow, turn to the slate, and erase all my devoted chalk marks with one sweep of the brush. Reverse perspective is that interesting painting technique whereby as the viewer moves left and right, closer and further away, the image in the painting moves as well. The painter, Patrick Hughes, is known for this, and you can see his acrylic on wood Eternity in the lobby of the Rosewood Hotel Georgia in Vancouver. Reverspective. I look at a picture of us. As I back away, the geometrics shift. Funny how our perspectives change. At a 45-degree angle, the lines disentangle, yet the horizon remains the same. Now I see us differently. Exaggeration of your exaggerations in the picture's kinetic striations, details of my relentless scrutiny. From straight ahead, looking directly on, the mechanics of the optics is drawn shift yet again. My eyes telling me one thing reliably, but my body moving in another direction entirely. I run up close, hoping to save it, but the picture goes flat. Disorientation complete. That's the genius of reverspective technique. There was a vanishing point at which you literally vanished. The picture of us is simply what I made it, each plane shrinking and expanding depending on exactly where I'm standing. Movement and change. We're all movement and change. Next, I wanted to share with you some pipeline poetry. I'd wanted to try to write something political that addressed the distinct polarized views on pipelines in Canada, so I wrote about a family sitting around the dinner table discussing the issues. The conversation deteriorates into a family fight. The two teenage children each represent environmental and sustainability arguments. The father represents the ethical issues such as consultation, while the mother represents industry. So it's about intolerance of different points of view and a rupture within the family within our country. Lighthouse Park. The girl from the wet west coast looked for somewhere to hide, sheltering under limbs of cedars, warm bark mulch beneath her feet. Damp from the forest floor wicked deep into her bones, she darted trunk to trunk, fern fronds wrapped around her shoulders, down the narrow trail to the rocky beach, seaweed slippery. Lift each rock gently one by one, look for crabs. Fill your bucket with seawater, don't spill, don't spill. She balanced on a log like a seagull. From the dark water surfaced a shiny head. The seal looked at her unblinking. Today she's in a boardroom. Large windows framing the North Shore Mountains, coastline vanishing into fog. Itchy wool suit, understated jewelry, embodiment of good governance and best practice. Amongst the black swivel chairs, long smooth glass table, cool lighting, corporate hues of gray. perfectly bound packages at each chair, defensible proposals, and the comfort of limited liability for blue sky governance. Her work, meticulous. Indeed, her guidelines on corporate ethics, actual, potential, perceived conflicts of interest, her strategic planning, all recognized by her profession as works of art. But despite the zero waste strategy, recycling program in the lunchroom, net emissions targets, bike room, in this LEED building, the windows don't open. Then what happens in the poem is there is the dinner scene and the family fight, and so we'll join it partway through. The whirlwind of words spins faster and faster with the force of youth and vigor, and while her children speak, she twists her wineglass by the stem, pondering whether there could be a physical equation for ideas. If mass is the strength of argument, and is multiplied by velocity, the speed, volume, and enthusiasm with which an argument is made, when does it result in sufficient momentum to give the argument legitimacy? Her husband is speaking now, but the voices have blended together, a din of dissent, discussion at risk of spilling over, slick penetrating the shoreline. Burnaby Mountain stands in gentle rain, layers of gray and green bleed from the ocean to the forest, to the city, brush strokes of watercolor that let you see the wind without feeling it. Despite years of work on this project, she's never actually been to the site, never seen the camps, the protesters, police lines. Passing tables of donated coffee and snacks, looking for her daughter's face in the crowd, she nods at a policeman and wonders whether he has had a similar dinner table conversation with his family. When she finds her, she stands next to her, takes her hand, "Talk to me." Next, a few words on wine with two poems, Red and White. Red. I have taken courses to learn the fragrances and flavors of wine. I can sniff and swirl. I know the differences between old world and new, the rules of food pairing, how hard cheeses subdue tannins in reds, how acidity cuts through fats and oils. But when I taste this wine, with eyes closed, I see candles flickering in mason jars on the table when we ate outside last summer. I smell tomato salad, rosemary evening air. Feel the chill that settled on my skin as the sun went down, me refusing to run inside to fetch my sweater, lest the moment end, not wanting to miss a minute of it. When I taste this wine, I hear the laughter of friends and children home from university gathered around that table under stars and a canopy of cedar branches. Hear children and friends sharing memories, making plans, reaching and passing, passing and reaching, talking at once. Drinking this red so carefully chosen for overtones of mushrooms and leather to complement the lamb wine. We are reaching and passing, passing and reaching, eating and laughing, voices rising into midnight blue ink. White. High up on the Naramata bench, in parched, arid heat, we follow a truck up winding roads and found the vineyard through the trail of dust perched bravely on the cliff. Sagebrush, rabbit brush, asters and lavender, the occasional pine, clinging to silt and sand glaciers left behind. We sat under a red umbrella sharing a pesto panini, marveling at how crisp, cold, white, ordinary table wine could taste so fresh, bright. For the rest of the summer, I drank that wine to remember that view and you. I'll close tonight with a tribute to fellow poets, the group poet Catherine Lewis calls our poetry fam. It's called Poets Rising, and I'd like to thank Michael Edwards for publishing it in the Red Alder Review. It's about emerging poets finding their voices, and a nod to Percy Bysshe Shelley's notion that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. If they're not, I think they really should be. Poets Rising. You should see how the poets dress. Silk slips cut on the bias, organza layers of imagery, ombre folds on grief, love, identity, sartorial storytelling. They hang their hats on metaphor, dangle participles and ruffle hemlines to lead the reader to things picturesque and sublime. But for each poet who finds strength in straight seams, I know of several whose structure unraveled into free verse. Now watch. Some have turned their anthologies over, open to mark the page, set down their cell phones of Instagram verse, left the soft lawns and shade of the local parks, the steaming warmth of the cafes, to march down the street barefoot to Parliament Hill, voices resonant with spoken word. Thank you so much for spending time with me tonight. Enjoy the rest of the evening, everybody.